Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. Tonight, you will be taken through 4 terrifying tales. Behind the locked bedroom door, the knocking that haunted a child for years was nothing less than a trapped spirit begging for release. In the basement of an abandoned factory, something waits in the dark, mimicking voices, chasing with inhuman speed. A sweet romance hides a monstrous truth, as obsession turns into horror beneath the bed. And in a quiet backyard, a cursed tree grows, feeding on souls, consuming an entire family. Prepare yourself. The nightmare begins now. 1. My parents forbade me from ever entering their bedroom. I finally broke in, and I think the knocking I've heard my whole life was my sister, asking me to kill her. There are rules in every family. Don't leave your wet towel on the floor. No television until your homework is done. Normal things. In my family, we had all of those, plus one more. One rule that was absolute, unspoken, and enforced with a silent, terrifying finality. You do not go into Mom and Dad's bedroom. It wasn't just a knock first situation. The door was always locked. I was never, ever, for any reason, allowed inside. Not to ask a question, not to retrieve a stray toy that had rolled under the door. That room was a fortress, and for my parents I was an invader. And from as far back as my memory goes, I knew why I wanted to go in. It was the knocking. It wasn't a constant sound, it was subtle. A soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump that you could only hear if you were standing in the hallway right outside their door. It came from inside, from the far wall of their room, the one that backed up against the old linen closet. I first noticed it when I was maybe 6 or 7. I thought it was the pipes, but the sound was too steady, too intentional. The curiosity of every child is a powerful force. A few times, I found the door unlocked by mistake. I'd sneak in, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps. The room was always dim, the heavy curtains drawn. It smelled of my mom's faint lavender perfume and my dad's cedarwood aftershave. It was just a normal bedroom. A big bed, a dresser, a tall, imposing wooden wardrobe against the far wall. And when I got close to that wardrobe, the sound was clearer. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from behind it, from inside the wall. I always got caught. It was like my mother had a sixth sense. I'd be in there for less than a minute, and I'd hear her footsteps in the hall. The look on her face wasn't just anger. It was a deep, primal panic, a terror that made her features sharp and strange. The punishments were swift and severe. No television, no friends, grounded for weeks. My dad would handle the lectures, his voice a low, cold monotone that was far scarier than yelling. There are places in this house that are ours, and ours alone. You will respect that, or you will find yourself respecting nothing at all. As a teenager, I tried a different approach, and thought that direct confrontation will do the thing. I asked them at the dinner table one night, "Why can't I go in your room? And what's that knocking sound I always hear?" Silence. The clinking of cutlery on plates stopped. My dad slowly put his fork down and leveled a gaze at me that was as hard and cold as granite. My mom just stared at her plate, her knuckles white where she gripped her knife. "There is no knocking sound," my dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you will drop this. This is the last time we will ever speak of it. If you mention it again, or if I find out you have tried to enter our room again, the consequences will be something you cannot begin to imagine. Am I understood?" I understood. I dropped it. but I never forgot. My mother's behavior only deepened the mystery. She was a good mom, loving in her own distant way. She went to work, she cooked, she cleaned, but any free time she had, she spent in that room. She'd disappear behind that locked door for hours on end. Sometimes I'd press my ear to the door and just listen. I never heard a television or music. Just a profound, heavy silence, occasionally punctuated by her soft, humming a tune with no melody, or the faint sound of her whispering to someone who never whispered back. Now, I'm 21. I've saved up enough from my part-time job to finally get my own place, a tiny apartment across town. I'm leaving, and a single, overwhelming thought has dominated my mind for weeks. It's now or never. I can't leave this house without knowing. This secret has been a silent third parent to me my entire life. A ghost at every family dinner, a shadow in every hallway. I have to cast the light on it before I go. I told my dad I was ready to move out. He was relieved. That's the only word for it. There was no sadness, just a weary sense of relief. He and my mom wished me luck, told me they were proud. I asked him one last time, my voice trembling slightly. "Dad, before I go, please, just tell me what's in the room." His face hardened instantly. The mask of the proud father fell away, revealing the cold, stern guardian of the secret. "Your new life begins when you walk out that door," he said. "What is in this house is part of your old one. You will leave it behind. Do you understand me? You will leave it all behind." That was his final answer, and it was my final motivation. I spent my last night packing my bags, a hollow feeling in my chest. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as their cars pulled out of the driveway, one after the other, on their way to work. The house was finally mine. My heart was a frantic bird in my ribs. I walked to the kitchen, to the old ceramic cookie jar shaped like a smiling pig. It was where they'd always kept the spare keys. I reached inside, my fingers closing around a single, cold brass key, the key to their room. I stood before their door, the key trembling in my hand. It slid into the lock with a well-oiled click. I turned it, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I remembered it. Dim, still, smelling of lavender and cedar. The big, dark wardrobe stood like a monolith against the far wall. And as I crept closer, I heard it, clearer than ever before. Thump, thump, thump. It was a slow, weak, but steady rhythm, a sound of flesh on wood. I knelt down, pressing my ear against the cold plaster of the wall, right beside the wardrobe. The sound was right there, on the other side. My own breathing was loud in my ears. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I wasn't insane. I spoke to the wall, my voice a choked whisper. "Hello? Is someone there?" The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was so absolute it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. I waited. Nothing. I was about to stand up, to write it off as the house settling, when a sound came back through the wall. It was a voice, a faint, dry, rasping sound. A feminine voice, stretched and thin, like a recording played on dying batteries. It spoke in broken, staggered syllables. K, ill, E. I jerked back as if I'd been burned. I scrambled away from the wall, my mind refusing to process the words. Kill me? I must have misheard. It had to be something else. But the voice came again, a little stronger this time, a desperate scratching plea. Kill me, please. This was real. There was someone in the wall, a prisoner. My mind went to a dark place. thinking my parents were monsters, that they had someone locked away. I looked at the wardrobe. It wasn't just against the wall. It was clearly, deliberately blocking something. M system was flooded. B, the adrenaline. I grabbed the sides of the heavy wardrobe and pulled. It was old, solid wood, and it barely budged. I grunted, dug my heels in, and pulled with every ounce of strength I had, my muscles screaming in protest. It moved, scraping and groaning across the floor, inch by agonizing inch. Behind it, where there should have been a plain wall, there was a door. It was a small, simple wooden door, painted the same color as the walls, designed to be invisible. It had a simple brass knob, but no keyhole. It wasn't locked. I could enter. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. It was cold. I turned it, pulled, and the door swung open with a low, mournful creak, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. I pushed it open the rest of the way. The space behind it was small, no bigger than a closet. It was a room, a hidden, secret room. It was filled with the clutter of a life I'd never known. Tiny dresses hanging from a single hook, a small, dusty mobile with faded pastel animals, a stack of photo albums. I picked one up. On the cover, in my mother's handwriting, it just said, "Our Angel." I opened it. The photos were of my parents, younger, happier, their faces bright with a joy I had never seen in them. And in their arms, they were holding a baby with a wisp of dark hair and my father's eyes. In the center of the small, cramped room was a makeshift altar, a small wooden table covered in a white lace cloth, now yellowed with age. It was surrounded by dozens of candles, some new, some burned down to melted stubs of wax. And on the altar, lying on a small silk pillow, I saw it. It was the baby from the photos. But it wasn't a baby anymore. It was a thing. Its body was small, shrunken, and desiccated, mummified. Its skin was a pale, translucent parchment, stretched tight over a tiny, bird-like skeleton. Its eyes were closed, its mouth a tiny, black O in its shrunken face. It was horrific. A tiny, preserved corpse displayed like a holy relic. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to touch it. A pull, a need to connect with this impossible, tragic thing. I reached out a shaking hand and gently, so gently, laid my fingertips on its cold, dry forehead. And the world exploded. I saw visions, memories, and pictures that are not my own. All flooded my mind with the force of a tidal wave. I saw a sterile, white hospital room. My mother, sobbing, her face buried in my father's chest. A doctor, with a grim face, saying the words, "I'm so sorry. There was nothing more we could do. Your daughter is gone." I saw my parents in their bedroom, the one I stood in now. They were holding the tiny, still body of their daughter, wrapped in a hospital blanket. My father, with a face covered by a mask of desperate, insane grief, was drawing a circle on the floor with red chalk. "We can bring her back," he was whispering. His voice was a frantic prayer. The book said we could. We just have to anchor her, give her a vessel to stay in. I saw them place the tiny body in the center of the circle, on the altar. I saw them kneeling, chanting words from a language that made my teeth ache. I saw the candles flicker and die, and a coldness fill the room as the tiny body on the altar twitched. Just once, and I felt her spirit, trapped, snatched back from the peace of oblivion and slammed back into her dead, decaying shell. I felt her confusion, her terror, her unending, eternal suffering. A conscious mind, growing, learning, trapped in an inert, unchanging prison of flesh, unable to move, unable to speak, able to do nothing but feel the slow, inexorable passage of decades and knock, knock, knock on the silent wall of their bedroom. And through it all, I heard her voice as a clear, soul-shattering scream inside my own head. "Please, kill me!" I ripped my hand away, stumbling back, a strangled sob tearing from my throat. I finally understood. My parents weren't monsters, not in the way I'd thought. They were just broken, drowned in a grief so profound they had committed an atrocity to try and escape it. They hadn't imprisoned a stranger. They had imprisoned their own daughter, my sister. I knew what I had to do. There was no other choice. I grabbed an old, soft blanket from the foot of their bed, returned to the hidden room, and carefully, reverently, wrapped the tiny, mummified body. It was as light as a bundle of dry leaves. I put it in my duffel bag, on top of my clothes. I took one last look at the sad, terrible little room, and then I walked out. I didn't close the hidden door. I didn't move the wardrobe back. I wanted them to know. I left the key on the kitchen table, walked out the front door, and never looked back. The drive was a blur. The visions didn't stop. I felt her gratitude, a wave of pure, beautiful relief, but it was tangled with the agony of her long imprisonment. I felt her pain, her loneliness, her terror, and I felt my parents' grief, a crushing, unending weight. I drove for hours until the city was a distant memory, until I was on a lonely road surrounded by nothing but fields and rust. I found what I was looking for, a desolate, abandoned scrapyard. There, among the mountains of rusted metal and broken dreams, I built a small pyre. I unwrapped my sister's body one last time, whispered. An apology for my parents, for my own ignorance, for her entire stolen life. I laid her on the pyre, doused it in lighter fluid, and with a flick of a match, I set her free. I watched as the flames consumed her, and as her tiny earthly prison turned to ash, I cried. I cried for the sister I never knew. I cried for the parents I could never go back to. I cried because I had done the most merciful thing I could imagine, and it was also the most monstrous. They'll come home. They'll see the open door. They'll know what I've done. They will hate me. They will despise me for taking away the one thing they had left of her, even if it was a perversion of her memory. I freed my sister, but I destroyed my family. And I don't know how I am supposed to live with that, too. We went exploring in the basement of an abandoned factory, and something found us. Zoe leaned against the old abandoned factory, lighting up a cigarette while waiting for her friends. "Don't forget the bag out of the car," Mason called back to his friend, Ethan, who was already pulling the bag off the back seat before closing the door. Yeah, he grumbled, slinging the bag over his shoulder. Zoe took another drag of her cigarette before tossing it onto the ground and stomping it out. It was an overcast day, and the factory stood unassuming in the middle of an empty field. Half the windows were shattered and the other half thick with grime. "All right, well," Mason looked at Zoe. We ready?" Zoe widened her eyes and pursed her lips in that exaggerated, "Well, here goes nothing, look." The three of them climbed through a hole in the wall of the building. There was a faint smell of oil and grease in the air, and a constant whistling from the wind threading through various openings. "Holy shit, this place is creepy," Ethan whispered. "You don't need to whisper. I don't think there's anyone here," Mason replied, throwing a stone through a window, causing it to shatter. The noise reverberated around the building. Ethan cringed at the sound. "Okay, was that necessary?" Zoe laughed and wandered further in, looking at all the abandoned machinery. Huge metal production machines left to rust stood looming over broken conveyor belts. So, apparently this building manufactured medical mannequins, Ethan said, scrolling through his phone. Mason shone his flashlight into a maintenance closet. What, like those CPR training dummies? I think so. Yeah. It says here they abandoned production in 1986 due to an accident claiming the lives of 7 workers. Fuck. Wonder what the hell happened, Zoe replied, moving a piece of timber out from in front of a steep, rusted metal staircase. She looked down into the darkness before shining her flashlight down. The light only illuminated a few of the steps. Hey, guys, creepy basement, she called out, turning around and looking at the other two. Mason tossed the piece of metal pipe he was holding and wandered over to her. Ethan turned his phone off and joined them. They all looked down into the darkness. Not it, Mason called first. Not it, Zoe replied quickly. Not fuck, Ethan sighed. Ethan took a deep breath before carefully stepping down onto the first step. The staircase groaned loudly, and Ethan immediately jumped back. It won't hold my weight. There is no fucking way, Mason groaned and pushed him out of the way, quickly descending the staircase, his flashlight disappearing into the darkness. Dude, Ethan sighed again. Zoe smirked and went down next. Ethan quickly followed, not wanting to be alone. The smell of oil and grease intensified, and the air became thick and humid. Zoe shone her flashlight down the steps, descending slower as she noticed a couple of the steps were missing. When they reached the bottom, they found Mason crouching down. Be careful. The floor is coated with grease or something, Mason said, looking up at them. Ethan shone his flashlight around the basement space. They were in a small brick room with a couple of connecting hallways and some pipes running along the walls and ceiling. The floor was concrete but coated with a slippery, grease-like substance. Mason stood and shone his light down the hallway. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wasn't normally a fan of enclosed spaces. If he was being honest, he didn't even really want to tag along, but apparently the guy who normally came with them was sick and couldn't make it. They followed the hallway slowly, making sure not to slide on the slippery floor. Zoe stopped at a doorway with a piece of paper taped to the door. Do not open. Mason turned and looked at the door. I think that means we should open it. What if there are dangerous chemicals in there? I mean, if it's worth putting a sign. Zoe ignored him and tried the handle, but it was locked. Fuck. Oh well. Ethan let out a quiet sigh of relief, and they carried on down the hallway. They passed another room and looked inside. The room was filled with open cardboard boxes. They wandered in, and Ethan poked his head into one of the boxes and screamed. A pale face with unblinking eyes stared back at him. He stumbled backwards and fell into another box. What? What the fuck happened? Mason rushed to pick him up. Zoe burst out laughing, reaching into the box and holding up one of the CPR dummies. Fucking hell, dude. Ethan's heart was still racing. You scared the shit out of us, you idiot. Zoe tossed the dummy back in the box. As they went to leave, they heard a loud crash come from down the hallway, like a shelf falling over. Dude! Mason froze mid-step. What the fuck was that? They all went quiet to listen. Must have been a bat, or maybe some kind of animal trapped down here? Zoe whispered. What if there's a fucking squatter down here, dude? Ethan stammered. Maybe we should go? Zoe whispered, even quieter this time. Are you kidding? This is awesome. Mason grinned, pushing ahead and walking towards the noise. What are you doing, dude? Ethan choked, nervously trailing behind. That's why we came down here, isn't it? To explore shit like this? Mason replied, turning his head. Watch out, Zoe called out, but Mason walked straight into a pipe jutting awkwardly out of the wall. Mason slammed into it, his feet sliding on the greasy floor as he went down with a thud. He groaned in pain. "Be fucking careful, dude," Zoe said, trying to pull him up without slipping. From the darkness ahead of them, a disembodied voice called out, "Be fucking careful, dude." The voice sounded almost exactly like Zoe's, but pitched down an octave. "What the fuck?" Ethan cried out, backing up carefully, trying not to slip. "What the fuck?" The voice rang out, slightly closer, mimicking his voice almost perfectly. Almost. Zoe pulled Mason to his feet. "Let's get the fuck out of here!" she yelled, and they all turned to run. Ethan was first, the light from his flashlight bouncing off the walls as he ran straight past the staircase hallway. Zoe and Mason made it down the correct hallway, and Ethan slid, trying to turn around. "Hey, wait for me, guys, please," he called out, his voice breaking. He felt his heart drop as he heard that voice mimic him again, and something far worse. Running. He heard something in a dead sprint coming towards him, like bare feet slapping against the floor. He screamed and turned to run, sliding every couple of seconds. The thing was gaining on him, like the slippery floor didn't affect it at all. He ran down the hallway and threw himself into a room filled with broken dummies. He put a hand over his mouth and hid in the corner of the room, crouching down as low as possible as the thing ran straight past. He could feel himself start to hyperventilate. It felt like at any second he would burst into tears. He sat in the darkness for what felt like hours. He had no idea where the thing was. He couldn't hear it anymore. When his breathing steadied, he clicked his flashlight on and stood up. There were hundreds of dummies stacked on top of each other. As he was stepping over them, he noticed one in the opposite corner. He froze. Something about this one was wrong. This one had arms and legs. His heart dropped. Its face contorted, and it opened its mouth. "Hey, wait for me, guys, please!" 3. My girlfriend has been acting weird. Hey everyone, I'm not the best at writing, so I apologize if this is a little weird or rambling. I've been keeping this to myself for a while now, and I really don't have anyone to share it with. Hopefully someone out there has gone through something similar. Oh, there's this girl. I'll call her E for privacy's sake. We've been dating for a while now. I don't think we're official, but there's definitely a connection. I know what that feels like. That spark, you know? It's been there since the first time I saw her in line at the pharmacy. She laughed at something the cashier said, and I swear I fell for her right then and there. Anyway, she's been acting weird lately. Not exactly cold, just strange, like she's worried about something. She kept looking back as she walked, as if someone was watching her. She held her bag tighter, walked faster. She even started taking a different route to work. I remember her stopping by the coffee shop for her morning coffee. Now she takes shortcuts through the side streets or sometimes around the park. I wanted to talk to her that day, but couldn't find the words to describe it. She used to dress a certain way too. Cute, soft sweaters, long skirts. Lately it's been hoodies, loose jackets, sometimes even a hood. It's like she's trying to hide herself. What was she hiding from? At first, I thought something was going on at work, or maybe an ex showed up. I don't know. But it's like she doesn't trust the world anymore. We used to have moments like this, not very deep, but special moments where I felt we were more connected, like when she stopped outside the bakery and looked at the cakes through the window. I saw her smile, and I smiled too. I always remembered which cake she stared at the longest. She never knew I paid so much attention to them. But now, she barely stops. Just walks down the sidewalk in the middle of the crowd. Head down. There are other things going on too. I think someone is harassing her. She started double locking her doors, hanging new curtains, installing a doorbell camera. I thought about knocking on the door a few times just to check in, but I don't want to make things worse. I love her. I really do. I just want her to see that. Anyway, that's why I'm writing this. I don't know if I should give her space or try to talk to her. I don't want to seem like I'm pressuring her or anything, but it's hard not to feel isolated when the person you love acts like you're a complete stranger. I miss her. I miss what used to be between us. I brought her flowers tonight. I'll surprise her. I know people say don't show up suddenly, but I think when she sees me, when she sees how much I care, it will help her understand. She's just confused, scared, but I can fix that. She can come home any minute. I'm quiet, don't worry. I'm writing this on my phone while I wait. The space under the bed is a little tight, but I don't mind. I've gotten used to it these past few nights. Being close to her while she sleeps fills me with joy and protection. I hope she can see how much I love her. I hope she doesn't scream. 4. My dad spent 15 years tending to the tree in our backyard. I just cut it down, and I don't think it was a tree. I don't know where else to turn. I can't talk to my mom about this. She's already a wreck. I can't talk to my dad because, well, he's the reason I'm writing this. I did something, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving him. But now, the house is filled with a silence that is so much worse than the screaming I wish I could hear, and I see the look in my father's eyes, and I know I've made a terrible, terrible mistake. I need help. I need someone to tell. I need to do. We live in a nice house, the kind of place people move to when they want a family. A big yard, a picket fence, flower beds my mom fusses over. It was a normal, happy place to grow up. Until the tree. It all started about 15 years ago. I was 10. My dad came home from work one day, absolutely buzzing with an energy I'd rarely seen. He was a quiet man, a decent man, worked a steady job in logistics, and his passions were small and manageable. He loved gardening. It was his escape. On this day, he was holding a small, wrinkled paper bag. "Look at this," he said, his eyes shining as he showed me a single, gnarled black seed. It was the size of a pigeon's egg, strangely heavy, and covered in faint, spiral patterns. Got it from a street vendor downtown, an old fella. Said it was special. Said it would grow into a great tree, a king in our yard. Said it would cast its shadow over the whole house and protect us. I was 10. I thought it was cool. My dad was a sane, rational man, but he always got a bit poetic when he talked about his garden. I just figured he was exaggerating to make his only kid excited. We planted it together in the center of the backyard. It was a good memory, one of the last purely good ones, I think. The tree grew, and it grew fast, faster than any tree has a right to grow. Within a couple of years, it was already taller than me. My dad was ecstatic. He tended to it like it was some kind of deity. He built a small, neat wooden fence around its base. Not to keep animals out, but, it seemed, to designate its space as sacred. No one else was allowed to water it. No one else was allowed to prune it. Not that it ever seemed to need it. It was his. For years, my mom and I just accepted it. It was Dad's hobby, his thing. When he was out in the yard, kneeling by the tree, we knew that was his time. We didn't interfere. We didn't think much of it. But the tree kept growing, and as it grew, my dad started to change. Subtly, at first. He'd spend more and more time out there. He'd come in for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and a distant, peaceful look on his face. He started talking about the tree, not as a plant, but as a presence. "The tree is well today," he'd say. "It enjoyed the rain." We'd just smile and nod. By the time I was in my early 20s, the tree was a monster. It was a species none of us recognized. Its bark was a smooth, dark gray, almost black, and its leaves were a deep, waxy green that seemed to drink the sunlight. It towered over our 2-story house, casting a vast, profound shadow over the entire backyard for most of the day. And that's when we really started to notice the wrongness. The first sign was the other plants. My mom's prize-winning roses, the vegetable patch, the cheerful little flowers she planted every spring, and anything that fell under the tree's shadow for more than a few hours a day would wither and die. The soil beneath it became barren, gray, and hard as rock. Then, the animals. Birds stopped nesting in our yard. The squirrels that used to chase each other across the lawn vanished. Even our family dog, a golden retriever, would refuse to go into the backyard. He'd stand at the back door, whining, his tail tucked between his legs, refusing to set a single paw in the shadow. But the worst change was in my father. His obsession became his entire existence. He quit his job. He said he needed to be home to attend to the tree. He'd spend all day, from sunrise to sunset, sitting on a small bench he'd built directly under its densest branches. He just sat there. Sometimes, we'd see him from the kitchen window, his head tilted as if he were listening to something. Sometimes, his lips would move, and we knew, with a certainty that made us sick, that he was talking to it. My mom and I tried to reach him. We pleaded. We begged. "Honey, please," my mom would say, her voice breaking. "Come inside. Eat something. You look so thin." He'd just shake his head, a slow, placid smile on his face. "I'm not hungry. The shadow is enough. It's so peaceful here. It comforts me. It can comfort you too, if you just come and sit with me." We never did. There was something about that shadow. It wasn't just a lack of light. It felt cold. It felt heavy. It felt hungry. Standing at the edge of it felt like standing at the shore of a deep, dark ocean. You knew you shouldn't step in. The last weeks were the breaking point. He stopped coming inside at all, except to sleep in his chair in the living room for a few fitful hours. He was wasting away. His skin was pale and waxy. His eyes were sunken, but they held a serene, vacant glow that terrified me more than any anger could have. He was being consumed. The tree was eating him alive, and he was letting it. I decided I had to do something. I had to save him. The tree had to go. I waited until night. I watched through the window until he finally, reluctantly, came inside and slumped into his armchair, falling into his usual restless sleep. The house was silent. My mom was asleep upstairs. This was my chance. I grabbed the heavy wood-splitting axe from the garage. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I stepped out the back door. The yard was bathed in the pale, ethereal light of a full moon, but the ground beneath the tree was a pit of absolute blackness. I stepped into the shadow. The cold was immediate, shocking. It wasn't a natural cold. It was a deep, draining cold that seemed to pull the warmth directly from my bones. I walked to the base of the tree. Its smooth black bark felt strangely slick to the touch, almost like skin. I raised the axe. As the metal head touched the bark, I heard it. A whisper, right beside my ear, a voice that was both male and female, old and young. It was a rustle of leaves and a sigh of wind and a voice all at once. "Don't!" I stumbled back, my heart seizing in my chest. I looked around wildly. The yard was empty. I had to have imagined it. It was the wind. It was my own fear talking back to me. It had to be. I steeled myself, spat on my hands, and swung the axe with all my might. Thwack! The sound was dull, wet, not the sharp crack of axe on wood I was expecting. It felt like hitting a side of beef. The axe bit deep into the trunk. I wrenched it free, and a dark liquid, black in the moonlight, began to ooze from the gash. I ignored it. I swung again, and again, and again. I fell into a frantic, desperate rhythm, sweat pouring down my face, my muscles screaming. The wet, fleshy thud of the axe, the splatter of the dark sap, the deep, draining cold of the shadow. It was a nightmare. With every swing, the ooze from the gash flowed more freely. The coppery, metallic smell of it filled the air. It was a smell I knew, a smell that had no business being here. It was the smell of blood. I touched the sticky liquid with my fingers, brought them to my nose. It was blood. Thick, dark, real blood. Panic, stark and absolute, seized me. I wanted to run. I wanted to drop the axe and flee and never look back. But then I thought of my father, of his vacant, smiling face, of him wasting away on his bench. I couldn't stop. I had to finish it. I screamed, a raw, wordless sound of rage and fear, and I put everything I had into the last few swings. The gash widened. The tree groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that seemed to shake the very ground. And then, with a final, tearing shriek of splintering matter, it fell. It crashed into the yard with a ground-shaking boom, its great branches shattering my mom's empty flower pots. Silence. The shadow was gone. I was panting, leaning on the axe, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My eyes were drawn to the stump, to the place where I had cut it. I pulled the small flashlight from my back pocket and aimed the beam at the wound. The inside of the tree wasn't wood. It was a chaotic, fibrous mass of what looked like dark red muscle and pale, glistening sinew, all woven around a central, horrifying core. Where I had cut the tree in half, I had also cut it in half. Embedded in the center of the trunk, integrated into its very being, was the torso of a human being. I could see the curve of the ribcage, the shape of the spine, the pale, rubbery look of preserved flesh. I had cut it clean through. The dark blood was still pouring from it, soaking into the ground. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind simply stopped. What was this? Who was this? Was this what my father had been talking to? Burn it. The voice came from behind me. It was quiet, raspy, and broken. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. My father was standing at the edge of the patio. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the fallen tree, at the mangled, bleeding stump, and the expression on his face, it was the most profound, gut-wrenching sadness I have ever witnessed. The vacant serenity was gone, replaced by a grief so deep it looked like it had cracked his very soul. "Dad," I whispered. "We have to burn it," he repeated, his voice hollow. "All of it, now." We worked together in a grim, silent ritual. We hacked the branches and the great trunk into manageable pieces. We dragged them into a pile in the center of the yard. My father moved like an old man, his newfound clarity costing him all his strength. He never once looked at the horrifying thing at the heart of the trunk. We doused the pile in gasoline, and my father threw the match. The fire went up with a roar, a greasy black smoke that smelled of burning meat and something else, something acrid and deeply wrong. We stood there for hours, watching it burn, until the great tree that had dominated our lives was nothing but a pile of glowing embers and a scorched black circle on the lawn. I thought I had saved him. I thought I had cut out the cancer that was killing him. But I was wrong. It's been a week. The tree is gone. The shadow is gone. My father, he's inside. He eats what my mom puts in front of him. He sleeps in his own bed. He's physically present. But he's not here. The obsession is gone, but the peace, twisted as it was, is gone too. It's been replaced by a constant, humming anxiety. He paces the house. He stares out the window at the empty space in the yard. He jumps at every unexpected sound. He doesn't speak, not a single word since that night. He just looks at me sometimes with those haunted, broken eyes, and I feel like I'm the monster. I destroyed the thing that was consuming him, and in doing so, I seem to have destroyed him too. I traded a smiling zombie for a silent, terrified ghost. What was that thing? What did I do? And how do I fix my dad? Is there any way to bring him back from whatever edge I've pushed him over? Please, if anyone has any idea what happened here, tell me. The silence in this house is getting louder every day. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.